The first time I ever saw spirit clairvoyantly, I was in some yoga retreat. I wasn't doing yoga, but it was at a yoga retreat, and somebody was having a class there. And I stood in a hallway talking to these two ladies, and one lady had just lost her son. And as she talked, a picture formed of a young man that was in his high school leather jacket. And I said, "Can I ask you a question? Did he look like this? Did he wear the jacket? Was the jacket this color? Was his hair this color? But it was like this." And he was kind of, and he was definitely a jock because of the way she was like, "Yes, yes, yes." And I thought, oh, it's just that simple. Someone is talking about their loved one, and you're listening with empathy and an open heart. And boom, if they aren't just there.
I'd like to welcome to the Journeying Soul, Tammy Young. Welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm in Austin, Texas, and it's nice and sunny. So, yeah, I'm enjoying it.
Good.
Thanks.
So, Tammy, I wanted to start by just going over some of the basics for the listening audience. You are a psychic and a medium.
That's
Yes.
right. That's right.
So you're both, because I know that sometimes it's considered to be a difference between the two.
Yes. So, usually when you work as a psychic, you're connecting in with someone like, it's so funny. I want to think about your belly button, but it's that part of us on our core. And then we're really addressing our higher self, looking for things that are previous, current, and future, right? So it's really all about the person that's coming and talking with you. When we do mediumship, we really act as sort of a channel between um, people in the afterlife and the person that's come to talk to you. So you're really just the go between with the information that spirit is delivering to us and interpreting symbols and those kinds of things, going, interpreting that message to the sitter.
And your story and a lot in your book, Afterlife Bonds. First of all, I have to say I liked your book very much. I have to read a lot of books. I don't always you don't always enjoy all the books you have to read, but you have a very nice voice, and that it's wonderful when somebody's own spirit comes through and it's nice and kind and loving. And I recommend your book just because it's got a sweetness to it. I really enjoyed. So, but your book
Thank you.
talks about how you connected with a half brother, Matt, that you didn't know that you had. Then he became ill and seemed to pass really quickly. And then you establish the title of the book, basically Afterlife Bonds. Were you a medium before your encounter with Matt, or was he the one who guided you into that part of your abilities?
Yes. Actually, I was a medium way before that.
Okay.
And that all came about when I lost a pregnancy at 20 weeks, probably 20 years before Matt showed up. And so it was through that loss that I really began to start on a spiritual journey, trying to figure out like what happened with this daughter. What would I ever see her again? How does this even work? And so that
Mhm.
really led me through years of my own sort of journey through reading books and going to classes and all of those kinds of things. So it was probably about 3 or 4 years before Matt came into my life that I had started taking clients and had gotten used to, you know, the world of psychic mediumship. So when he showed up, you know, we had no clue that what Matt's story was. But I also want to say I had gone to a psychic medium because I was in one of these classes. And a bunch of other people were like, "Oh my God, this is so cool. This lady's wonderful." And I thought, I'm just going to get on that train and let's just go have fun with that too. She
Mhm.
was so sweet. She was in the UK and she was actually doing tarot. And she started telling me, oh, you have this family here. She asked me evidence around an answer being yes, but I didn't know any of the evidence that she was giving me. So I kept thinking, well, what's going on here? But then she got real assertive with me and said, nope, there's somebody out there looking for you and they're going to find you through DNA. I was like, what? So I love that she gave me evidence telling me not only is there someone there, but this is how they're going to find you. And to me, that really directed me down this path. Anyway, when he showed up, we were all ecstatic. Here I was, I had an older brother. I currently have an older brother, but we both now had an older brother. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it was just wonderful. So when Matt showed up, it was probably within a month or so after that he had gotten into a bike accident. And during that time, he had gone to the hospital, they were doing surgery, they found that he had a tumor, but then, they sent him home.
And you hadn't met him yet at that point because you and Randy were planning. I'm sorry, we should tell the audience you're the older brother you grew up with, Randy. The two of you were planning to go see him, but then this
Yes.
accident definitely happened first, as well as.
And so the accident occurred, and we were like, oh, we need to come visit you, make sure everything's okay. Then we found out, oh no, I have another surgery. They want to just check and, let my brain kind of unswell or kind of the swelling go down. And we said, oh, okay, well, we'll come after that. But it was that surgery that he said that it was like stage 4 brain cancer. So now there's like a time, now you're on a timetable about, whoa, wait a minute, what's, and all up into this time frame, I had clients, did psychic mediumship work, but it was sort of that time frame from when we found out that his days were numbered effectively, that things really got wonderfully crazy. I mean, you see in the book that things happen before he shows up, things like precognizant dreams, like symbols.
Yes. I thought your book was so wonderful for people who want to develop their abilities. Like, I'm a person who wants to develop my abilities. I wouldn't say I've always been an intuitive person. I wouldn't consider myself psychic at all. But I've had multiple after death communications from family members that I've lost. So I know that there's a language there. And I thought two things, the way you instructed people to start two journals, like a dream journal and then another one, and to just be putting your material in it without really analyzing it, and how it really just came across to me. And I've heard other psychics and mediums say this about developing your own symbolic language. And you really illustrate how it's one thing to give people the tips, but in telling your own story, you really showed, I felt, how your language was evolving in that direction, because you did describe, and I will let you speak, the dreams you had, that you didn't know what those symbols meant until then you were speaking with Matt and you found out what was going on in his life.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. I so appreciate that what I was trying to do worked because
For
I
me, it did. Yes.
yeah. And I really just want to say that I felt like there were books out there that we were talking like medium to medium and
Mhm.
medium to psychic. We were doing all that kind of stuff, but we weren't talking to people that were affected by the grief that we were
Mhm.
all, connecting into. So when I thought about that, I realized that a lot of people around me are just not even sure like what I do. So I really felt called to use this as the example to work with people that are just building, right? Wanting to do more, like you said, and people that are already getting symbols and experiences, but not sure what to do with them. So
Yeah, it's like we're psychic curious or medium curious or something. We're not.
adjacent. And
Yes.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. And we love that. I mean, that's perfect. And yeah, I mean, for me, I wanted to show my journey as it was happening. And And so you do see, what are my symbols and how did I respond to them? Of course, in the beginning, when I talked about that first dream that happened, the only reason I even had a dream journal at that time was that I was going to teach a class to a few people because it was a pandemic. We were going to try to do something online. So it was a small group. So I had set this up, a few months in advance. But I thought we really need to start with dreams because that is the easiest way for people in the afterlife to connect in with us, right? We're not stressed. We're just hanging out. We're in those theta waves, just relaxing. Um, but so so I had this dream journal set up, and there was some chicken scratching in there, before this. But I think it was just maybe a week before Matt showed up, the first dream occurred, and it was about gold miners that were scratching across the California coastline looking for a golden nugget. And that symbology for me was that it was really looking for gold. And I just thought, wow, I wrote it down. I wonder what it meant. But when Matt showed up, the thing is, I and my brother Randy were born in California, and Matt lived 60 miles away from where we were born in Ventura, and Matt lived 60 miles away from there. So that was information. There's no way I could know those kinds of things, right? So here we are seeing this connection back to California and this relationship, and a relationship that felt like gold for me. So, yeah, so for me, those were symbols of however I created those, right? Whether it was through reading, experience, or whatever. But those were my symbols for what was to come, for sure.
Mm-hmm. And I know you had some dreams also that were pointing you in the direction of his illness before it even came to light and before you knew about it, for sure. So,
Yeah, and
um,
and that was interesting too. Some a symbol of a mass of people that seemed to be headed somewhere. When I looked closer, I could see that they were running toward a man who had fallen. He was hurt. They were trying to make sure he was okay. Whatever this accident was, I knew that he was on a bike. I wasn't sure if it was a motorcycle or a bicycle, but I could see that there was an accident. People were running, people were saying different things I could hear, but I didn't understand any of them. Um, I put that in my dream journal, only to find out later, right, that that was part of the story. That was the evolution of him having to, go to the hospital, that he had actually lost his balance on a bike and was sent to the hospital. And then later on, there's another dream where I think it was probably maybe just even a week later. They weren't that far apart. But the next one had such a beautiful, I would say like a Japanese flair to it. And I have no idea where that came from. But it was really a symbol of a man who had been hurt. He was being examined. And what I saw was the back of a man sitting on a very high pedestal, and he had just like all these sparks coming out of the top of his head, either as though something was being worked on, or these sparks were giving off, as things were trying to be fixed.
mhm.
So that symbolized for me that there was an issue about trying to fix the top of his head, and that there were all these very important people watching. And yeah, and it was really shocking to me to later to find out that, that this really was brain cancer. Like, who knew? And then there was some other dreams later that had to do with my vision of what I felt cancer might look like, that being kind of a reddish, orangish monster, that we're trying to fight back. Um, yeah, I just felt like once Matt showed up in my life, everything in my being sparked. I had never had these kind of dreams before. I don't feel like I've really had them since, but that showed up. I know that as things progressed with Matt, um, the mediumship, the psychic sensing, everything was just like high alert. But that brought me to a sense of, you know what, I've been preparing to be in this position for someone I love for years. So I proposed to my brother, let's do this. Like, let's go on this journey together. Like, you have this opportunity to show me the other side, like in a way that I don't know, right? Because as a medium, I pretty much have channeled for people and their loved ones, and that's a
Mhm.
lot of what I was doing. But now I could be in a position where Matt would like take me across the veil, you know? I mean, I would get to do more with him than I had ever done before. So I was
Mm,
sort of asking for that. And I was telling him, hey, here's an opportunity for us to do some
yes.
really cool stuff together.
Yes. I probably misspoke before. I mean, he didn't really start your abilities, but he just took them to this other level
Yes,
when I was yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So post the story in the book that's captured in the book, you're still having communications with Matt?
So, yes, but what I love is he has, for instance, there's the very last story in the book, I think that we talk about this so amazing, has to do with him and I shopping together for a baby gift because he became a grandfather for the third time, right?
Mhm.
Since that time, um, I feel like he's more integrated with my spirit group that works with me when I work. Um, but the beauty of what he does with me is a little bit more. He's integrated with that, but I also know, like as you began to talk today about the book and what you felt like what it's done for people that are maybe just starting to think about sensing,
Mhm.
it's chills. And so he's always there, right? Because this is basically his book. I feel like he's always there. He's always with me. And chills, I feel like he works with the whole chill situation. And it's a feeling of, yep, that's right. And we did the right job. We did the job that we were meant to do here. So
Mm.
he's just more integrated. As I'm talking with people, whatever they're talking about, whether it's this book, whether it's a personal situation, whether it's, gee whiz, I think I want to come see you, but I'm not quite sure, how to, you know, that whole thing, he's right there and I feel him. So it's ongoing.
Mhm.
And at the end of the book, he says that he's my volunteer spirit guide. So I love that.
Let's talk about then I do wanna hear about how your abilities developed overall. Like, how old were you? Did you have a particular religious upbringing? How did your family support you? Let's
That's a
go.
I think that's a really interesting one, because my background, I mean, I went to school as a engineer. I have an engineering degree in electrical engineering,
Yes.
right? Um, but my early childhood, and I don't go real deep in the book about this, but my early childhood, my parents were young when they had children, and I just don't know um, if they really kind of knew what to do with us, So
Mhm.
when they realized that children should go to church, they thought, oh, children should go to church. So they would drop us off at church and be like, there you go, do your thing,
Oh,
you
so they
know?
weren't there with you. I know your dad was an engineer also, right? So you
Yes.
followed in that family tradition. So they okay, so they they were not church going, but they thought you should be. Okay.
Yes. So we're going to send you to church and do, right? So I was kind of like, well, this is interesting. These were a lot of really nice people, and honestly, I enjoyed that people were kind and they were spiritual. And and that was probably like middle school. That
Mhm.
maybe I would say middle school, maybe beginning of high school. That was the situation. Then we started moving around a lot, but when I was younger, I always think about people do ask me like, well, what was the first time you saw or realized? And I always go back to this story about my mother in the kitchen, right? During the holidays, the weekends, I would always be cooking with my mother. And I do remember this one particular day where I had the cutting board and I was chopping something, who knows what. But I was kind of chattering along, with my friend that was over on the and she sort of stopped and looked at me and said, "What are you doing?" And I said, well, I'm cutting these whatever, potatoes or whatever. And she says,
Mhm.
well, no, who are you talking to?
How old were you when this happened?
I was old enough to realize that she was shaming me to stop.
Mm,
So
you
I
probably,
would say elementary school.
yeah, grade school. I
Yeah,
was thinking,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. And then it was
Okay.
kind of like, who are you talking to? And I was like, no one. And it was like, right answer. And off we went. And I was like, wow. So, so the other extreme is, well, my dad's an engineer. I guess maybe that's the right thing to do. So, off I went
Mhm.
down that path. Yeah. So
But so you were having a conversation though in grade school. Now, even though
with,
you didn't tell your mom about it anymore, did it continue? How did you carry on? Or
you
did
know,
things go
I,
dormant for a while?
well, so here's another kind of an interesting thing. I don't think I've ever told anybody. So this is la la. I grew up in Orlando, Florida, and where we lived was very NASA centric. There was we could stand in the backyard and watch rockets go off at night. So I feel like there was a lot going on around me, and I don't know if it was all spirit based or or otherwise, but I always felt energy and spirit around me. So I would just say that. Yeah, I know at one point I really thought that I was in bed one night and I thought, oh, I sense what's going on. And I saw a little face come around the edge of the door and look at me and stay there long enough for me to be like, oh, and then it disappeared. And I kind of went, oh, I remember just feeling very sort of almost like a paralyzation, like feeling very, and I just thought, oh, like whatever that is, I'm a little scared of that. So can we not do that again?
So do you think that was I don't want to presume, but since you were mentioning NASA, do you think that was more
Yeah.
alien visitation than spirit visitation?
I
Or you don't
wonder.
know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. But as we see pictures of like um the grays and the big
Mhm.
eyes,
Very
and it was
popular grace.
yeah, and it was small, and it was like a child figure, and there would have been no reason. I mean, my brother was a bigger guy. He never got out of bed. I mean, he's a guy who loved his sleep, and it wasn't, he was a bigger guy, and this was a small, I would say it was like being or child or whatever. And I kind of went, oh, that kind of scared me. Let's not do that.
Yeah, you knew it wasn't Randy though, pranking you. So
Yes, 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 yes.
yeah.
Yeah. So that was really, that was the only, as a child, that was kind of the energy, even after my mother was trying to say, let's put a lid on that. So,
Hmm.
yeah. But then, as time went on, um, it really, it really was the loss of a pregnancy at 20 weeks of a little girl that just like blew the lid off, right? Because everything was engineering, right? Everything that you wanted from that and the way you thought, right? And I married an engineer. So here I am in the engineer hive, and I'm like, oh, okay. So that was really the spark, the beginning of me really starting my journey in a way that was really very clear.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's this podcast, I say it's like heal loss, connect with spirit, manifest a new life. But it is so many people have, if they have, whether they have latent abilities that have been sitting there or a little bit more evolved abilities, sometimes, unfortunately, that loss is the thing that propels you to want to have that communication and it starts to open up everything else. So tell me though, I know it's in the book a little bit, how you transitioned from being an engineer to doing psychic mediumship full time. This is a story that I've heard from other people. They talk about how they left their respectable job
Yeah.
to do what they do full time, and that there's challenges there. So how
Yeah.
did it go for you?
Yeah. So, once I had lost Zoe, I think I think for a lot of people, right? I felt like I was so low that there was the only thing left for me was really to go spiritual because I felt like though that time that I was at church when I was younger, they kept, talking about there's so much more. And I thought, well, let's look into that because I feel pretty lost at the moment. And my husband at the time was really having a hard time because he was like, born and bred engineer. And so the idea of trying to support a wife through this, it was really hard for him. So I felt a lot, I was on my own, right? So lots of books, lots and lots of books. So a lot of reading going on. But I really felt my interest in my job starting to really just wane, like it began to disappear. I went from like working full time to, after losing the baby, went back and did a part-time. It was an engineering job part-time. And just, I did that for a few years and I was just like, my heart is not in this. And every time I think about what else would I do, because I wanted to continue working, it just all ended up back in the spiritual arena. So I really felt like, I've really got to look into this. And then like once I left that job, right, the next thing I thought is, what I could do? We had a little bit of money on the side, and I said, why don't we invest? We're in Austin, Texas. Let's invest in a duplex or so. And I could like work on that, but then I would still have time to do more on the spiritual side. So it just became this progression, right? Um, at some point, I did get divorced. We decided this just, wasn't working for us. We got divorced. And that was kind of another sort of pivotal moment for me because now it was really 100% what do I see my future as? I mean, when I got divorced, I had two children with me. I say children. I had a middle school and a high schooler, right? But they were pretty much, doing their own thing. So at one point, um, like timetables here. But I guess the point is that I was able to really direct my own future. And the kids went on to go to college and do their thing and become engineers, right? Which is very interesting, right? The respectable job there. But for me, I kind of veered off in the other direction. And I started taking some classes and I just really thought like, this is really where my soul sings this and there is expansion going on here. I just feel like this is where I need to be. This is every time when I head in this direction, I feel better. I'm more energetic. I need to, investigate this. So I took, classes from different kinds of teachers. I did quite a bit with Lisa Williams. My first class was with James von Prague. And it was
Yeah,
funny
they
because
both offer stuff. Were you doing this online? Because I know they both offer a lot of stuff online. I don't know if they did at the
well,
time when you were starting, but
James von Prague was in person, and I didn't. It was a psychic mediumship, like a beginner's. I think it was just mediumship, and I said, "Oh, I know him. I've read a bunch of his books. I'll go there." I had no idea what the difference between the two were until we started doing exercises in the class, and it was wonderful. It was just 3 days, but I walked away from that first class going, "You know what? I need to do more because." There was always things happening. If we were set together to do an exercise, if there would always be responses and answers, right? And people would have to validate what you said. And they were like, yep, yep, yep. And I'm like, oh boy, I need to do more. That just set me on the pace. And I did a lot with Lisa Williams before the pandemic. But when the pandemic came around, that was definitely it was a great place to be with Lisa Williams because she jumped on to Zoom. We did readings, we held classes, and none of us even thought that this kind of work. I mean, could we do that on Zoom? We just didn't even know. And she managed it. So like huge kudos to her for that.
yeah. So did you have any, um, were they your most influential teachers, I guess is what I'm asking?
Yes, along with the
Mhm.
third teacher, and I will say his name. I know he's not super like well known. His name is Anthony Maraca, and I believe that he's in your neck of the woods. He's up east. Um, there were some things that he held a small class, and it was the first time for me that as I was doing a reading with someone, doing a mediumship reading for someone. So there's three of us. Anthony was able to do something like join that reading on my side and direct me internally as to, oh, you said that person owned a blue car. You know more, say more. And directing me into, oh my gosh, I know that that car came from your father. I know that it was held in the garage. I know that he had passed and no one was certain who would take that car. There was discuss. So that kind of leadership was just amazing for me, right? That was the first
Wow.
time, yeah, that people would say, oh, can you say more? Can you go deeper? And I'm like, what does that mean? Well, he got into my business with me and we went deeper together. And I was like, ooh,
Now, wow. So he was backseat driving kind of there. Was he verbally saying you know more, or was
yes, yes,
okay? So this is not like he was in my head saying you know more. He was
yeah,
saying, I can feel I know you know more. Say it.
yes.
Wow.
Yeah, so there's good teachers that will work with you on that level. I think when you're first starting, that's really not your concern. You want to know that the person you're talking with is giving you yes. It's like, yes, I understand that, right? But as you move
Yes.
along, I think you really want to be doing more.
Well, I think you touch on two things that I feel are so important for people trying to develop their skills. One, you talk about in your book, which is validating the signs. Like it's important to get hits that are verifiable in some way, that at some point you sort them out, you know that what they mean. And that's important. But the other thing you touch on that even you had was developing confidence, the confidence to say more, the confidence
Yes.
to say anything at all. So,
Yes, right?
yeah.
That's the number one thing, whether you call it trust, putting your trust in spirit,
Hmm.
whether you call it human fear, right?
Hmm.
Because you don't want to be wrong.
Yeah.
Like whatever that is, I think that's for me, it's like a soul maturity.
Hmm.
Now I've got my grandmother on one side and I've got my brother, Matt, on the other. And so I know that my team is with me. And I think it's just
Hmm.
that maturity that puts you in a better position to you always hear people or other mediums that will say to you, say what you see. Now, I'm more clairvoyant. That's my strongest. But there's so many times you get in your head and you're like, oh, it's a car. But what does that mean? Is it blue? What does that mean? Right. And then you're trying to figure out, oh, well, what should I tell them? Like, no, I see a blue car. Right.
Hmm.
So yeah, but and that's a universal thing, fear.
Mm. It's interesting though. I had a conversation a couple of weeks ago with a psychic medium named Corby Mitleid, who's upstate New York, my neck of the woods. And it strikes me in my conversation with you in some ways there's like two kinds of psychics. There's the kind that are, more reserved and careful, want to say what they see or they know or they hear or they feel, but not more than that. Like they know where the coast, the water, the beach of their ability should stop. And then she was describing like psychics, that she does what she calls drive-by psychic shootings, like people who will come up to you and just kind of get into your space and they're very confident about what they are seeing and feeling and knowing. And it's important, I think, to be the kind that you are. Like she just talks about personal ethical boundaries, but also just being confident and mature, but a little bit more reserved. Now, do you have a problem that where you had to learn to have an off switch at any point? Were things ever coming through to you that were intrusive or at a time you didn't want them? Was that something you ever had to deal with? Some people do, some people don't.
Yeah, I think some people are very open. And for me, I think it's that transition from like engineer into the psychic mediumship realm. I think that there was just more of a controlled entry for me, right? When I
That's a
would
very NASA term,
I
Florida
know.
girl.
as I when I first started meditating and really wanting to kind of sit a lot deeper than maybe I had before, I noticed that like my boundaries were pretty open. So I felt like seeing a lot of things that I was not interested in engaging with. And it was really over a period of time that I learned to say, I acknowledge you, I see you, I am not interested, move along. And
Hmm.
so Yeah, so I think for people that are maybe just starting, right, to know that that you have this ability to control what you want that mental situation to be for you, that it is not, oh my gosh, they're coming at me, right? You just
Mhm.
tell them, no, you need to leave, right?
Yeah. Now, did any other, psychics or mediums counsel you in that, or did you just evolve that on your own? The
I feel like I feel like a lot of psychic and medium, well, mostly mediums will talk about that because you're kind of
Mhm,
used to being that space and sensing what
mhm.
spirits are around you. I feel like it's mostly mediums, but there is that concern about boundaries and setting up your own boundaries so that you're not, awake at night talking to people and all that kind of business. I have to say, when I first started having dreams, I was wondering, is this a boundary issue for me, right? Why am I having these dreams? But when I had a place to put it, like putting it into the journal and leaving it there, it didn't stay with me. So I figured out that was something different. This doesn't have to do with boundaries. And then when I realized like this is related to Matt, I'm like, bring it on because I always had this sort of situation with my guides, like I don't really want to be surprised. I do, but I don't. I don't want to be surprised in a bad way.
Mhm.
So, can you guys like just always tell me what's coming up? And by God, they did. And I'm so
Wow.
thankful for that. So,
Mhm. How did you develop you said Matt is now part of your circle of guides? How
yeah.
did you, evolve your relationship and develop that relationship with your guides?
So for me, I feel like there is like when I meditate, I journal after that. And the things that will come up, giving whatever my current situation is, the things that will come up are usually related to if I'm asking, like, oh my gosh, what do I do next? Or what do I do for this or that or whatever. Um, at one point, when I was thinking about writing this book, I was consistently seeing a figure, a woman dressed in a cloak, you know, and it was dark green, a darker green. Not I feel like a Kelly green is kind of bright, but it was
Mm,
darker, like mossy. I
mhm,
kept seeing her like maybe every few days when I would be journaling. She would show up and different things around her, and so I just began to ask, like, who is this? Right. And
mm,
eventually I was actually talking to another friend of mine, and she's like, ooh, do you want me to clue in on her? And I said, yeah. She's like, oh, her name is Aurora. So Aurora was here with me, and guides will be with you for a period of time. And now that like everything has moved along and now we have a published book, I don't see her anymore.
mm, mhm,
But the interesting thing is Matt is here. And he has evolved, right? Just because as emotional things would come up, like in my waking hours, it doesn't have to be meditation, but in my waking hours, I notice the chills or the silly things that'll happen. Like if you're on your way somewhere and you know, you're wondering if you should get that ice cream or not, and you go by an ice cream truck and you're like, okay, we'll pull right in here. I mean, I just feel like they're helping me more with my daily lives as opposed to really having to sit and meditate.
mhm,
So, but I do feel like it's for whatever reason, Aurora wanted me to know that she was working with me. I just thought that was beautiful. But
mhm.
yeah, and you do have your guides will come and go depending on what your situations are. But I love that Matt. I believe that Matt and you, Leela, my grandmother, are here with me until the end. So
Yeah, I would think they're not going anywhere
I hope not. I
as
just love them.
as Earth family. Yeah. You mentioned meditation. Now, how did you start, your meditation practice, and does it work for you where you're trying to clear your mind, or are you outreaching? Because there are different kinds of meditation where you clear and then you open up, but some people it's just like, I just need the silence of no thoughts at all. So how does it work
Right?
for you?
I do both of those. I have to tell you, when I was first really like, I need to meditate, was when I was getting divorced and things were just so hard. and I wake up in the morning to these emails and immediately I would just be like, a nervous
Mm,
wreck. And I just thought, I'm going to use meditation to really calm myself back down. I said, I'm not going to read those emails till after I've meditated or gone for a run. That worked fantastic too. Um, and those that helped me realize like this is my center. And when people begin to pull you off that center, then that's when you really have to have more boundaries. But so during that period of time, it really was more about centering, calming, and whatever that was, if that was clearing, and whether I used a guided meditation that was instruments, or if it was a guided meditation to talk to my guides. It really for me was more quieting the mind. But there are times when, I just like, hey, I'm having a good day or whatever, and or maybe you're just curious, like, oh, you want to go on vacation? Where should we go? Just
mhm,
for me, connecting every day keeps me in a more sort of centered space. And I don't feel like my guides during meditation are always showing up, tell me something amazing. Sometimes it's just being in a feeling of just sort of love and being uplifted and just enjoying that. And so when I try to write every day in my journal, and many times it's maybe just a symbol, or they have told me, hey, you need to get colored whatever. I chose
mm,
colored pencils because color kept coming up for me. So whether I'm drawing or I'm writing or just symbols without color, all of those things really, I feel like center me daily.
mhm,
So I tend to do both, whether I'm reaching out or I'm just needing to sort of calm down.
mhm. Do you have a process when you're working with clients? Like how do you have any, calming down, getting in the space ritual that you need to do before you see clients?
So it's interesting. When I'm going to say like for psychic, Um, I have a ritual where I meditate or sit for them in the morning. And I usually just sort of look at like health and relationships and like money and jobs. I just kind of go through that.
Mhm,
And they do have the opportunity to tell me in advance kind of what their, here's kind of what my issue is or what I want to look at.
mhm.
So I usually kind of get a sort of like scanning, like how are things going for them, and anything that pops up, we talk about. And then at the end, I always am asking, like, I ask spirit, is there something that we need to talk about that like doesn't come under these headings?
Mm,
There's
mhm,
always something. There's always something sort of fun or silly, and but there also might be some things that are a little bit more serious. But what that does is when I sit and do that, when the client comes, we talk about what's come up in the morning, and then that springboards into, okay, but this, and this. So in
That's
that,
very interesting because that's almost like my process for preparing for an interview with you or anybody else. I read your book, I check out some of anything you've done on the web. I'm writing up my list of questions and I'm thinking of you in advance. And so when I get here,
yeah,
it's like, well, let's see what happens. But that's very interesting because I didn't know, I mean, I've had been to psychics and mediums over the years, and I've certainly interviewed so many now that I was curious if some people just like when I see like a James Van Prague or something or a Lisa Williams and they're online, it seems like they just plop down in the chair and it turns on.
yeah.
But
And I think for
and
some
I think
people,
I could never do it that way if I it's that way. So
well, you know what I found? The reason I do it that way, because a lot of people work just like you just said, they'll sit down. And when we've been in classes, they're not going to give me time to go sit in the corner and, meditate. They're like,
Mhm.
okay, go at it. So I've done it
Yeah.
both ways. But what I do is like most of my time with a client is about 45 minutes. And I feel like my engineering brain, we want to go slow and methodical. Are you sure? Yeah, that's right.
Mhm.
I feel like people get the best, I'm going to say bang for your buck. If I sit and I know exactly what I'm coming into and that we springboard from that, just
Yeah.
as like this interview with you, you are extremely prepared. So it's right. It just flows.
Thank you.
Yeah. Now, I have to say though, for mediumship, it's much different. So for
Mhm.
mediumship, um, I ask the person who's come to see me if they would ask, say they want to connect with their mother, ask their mother to come join us tomorrow at 11. And
Mhm.
I ask also. But the interesting thing is, they usually show up for me a little earlier. So by the time I sit down with my client, it's kind of like, okay, your mother's here. She's already told me, yada, yada, yada,
Mhm.
So, but I try to definitely go evidential in the beginning because I'm more clairvoyant, being able to say, I have a lady here and this is her age and this is what she's wearing in her hair. And as I ask her what she passed of, I feel, this here and that there, and going from once we feel like spirit's with us, then we might want to go just more freestyle. She's been with me and she's told me, right? But she's with
Mhm.
us. So, more it becomes a lot more conversational after that. So it's
Mm.
just two different ways to work. Yeah. So I enjoy
Yeah,
both.
but you still have some of that advanced prep. I mean, another medium
Yeah.
who's done tons of media, like when we're talking about James Van Praagh and Lisa Williams, like we could go on, the John Edward and
Yeah.
but Tyler Henry, he's done a ton of
Oh,
media. And my mother got into these shows recently, so I've been seeing more of them. And he seems to always be, if he's not thinking in advance, by the time he's in the car and someone's
yeah.
driving him, he's kind of tuning in and he's doing his scribbles and he's there beforehand. It's almost like you for many people, you need the quiet of your alone space a little bit to make the connection before somebody's in front of you. Um, that's what it seems
Yes.
to me. But
Most of the time, that's true. The first time I ever saw spirit clairvoyantly, I was in some yoga retreat. I wasn't doing yoga, but it was at a yoga retreat, and somebody was having a class there. And I stood in a hallway talking to these two ladies, and one lady had just lost her son. And as she talked, a picture formed of a young man that was in his high school leather jacket. And I said, "Can I ask you a question? Did he look like this? Did he wear the jacket? Was the jacket this color? Was his hair this color? But it was like this." And he was and he was definitely a jock because of the way she was like, "Yes, yes, yes." And I thought, oh, it's just that simple. Someone is talking about their loved one, and you're listening with empathy and an open heart. And boom, if they aren't just there. I was still working on my mediumship at that time. So I was like, oh, I don't really know what to do now. But that was the first time I ever saw a spirit really clairvoyantly.
mm, thank you for sharing that. I always like
Yeah.
those first stories and what it felt like, and
Yeah. Yeah. It's so inspiring, right? And that stays with me forever because I will never forget him.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now do you still when you consulted with another psychic, which was who was the woman in the UK who basically told you about Matt's existence and finding each other through DNA before it happened. Do you still consult with other psychics or other mediums? I'm thinking not mediums, but maybe other psychics. Do you still do that? Because I am curious about the psychic on psychic connection, like what makes a psychic go to another psychic and how that is in the room in a way, or over
That's
Zoom, I suppose, that these days, how
yeah.
the energy goes.
That's a fantastic question because yes, I actually have an appointment on my books now with somebody else who's a psychic medium. And, we all go through these times in our life where things kind of just get fuzzy and you're trying to like clarify, like, where am I going next? Or I think I'm supposed to do this, but boy, it doesn't seem like I should, those kinds of, it's just like a guidance kind of a thing. But I absolutely do that. And a lot of these people that I have gotten to know along the way have become my friends. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's a beautiful world for us, where we can help each other through this, I guess, existence or this reality that we've all come to know. But yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. We reach out to each other all the time. especially like if you're looking at like, oh, I'm going to move. It's like, oh, but, you know,
The big life decisions. It's funny,
yeah,
you can have the ability to see things that you are not so emotionally attached to as your own life, I suppose.
yeah.
Um,
That's the positive, right? Is that
yeah.
even though you're my friend, and if you are too much of my friend, we might say, oh, let's go to a third person because they would be much more just straightforward and not have that emotional attachment.
Yeah. So I am going to move on to what I call my lightning round of questions, the final
Ooh,
questions I ask all my guests.
great.
Um, I hope so. Um, so what does a well-lived life look like to you?
Oh, I feel like I've had that challenge, right? So I feel like it's about your soul. I want to say following your soul. Like we may not know our soul purpose, but if we allow ourselves to be drawn in the direction that makes us happy, I feel like that's a life well lived.
Do you feel this is a digression? Do you feel that people have past lives? I mean, obviously, you know that people you can still communicate with Matt and your grandma, so you know that
Yeah.
soul goes on.
Yeah, I really do, especially after reading I think it's Brian Weiss, his book Many Lives, Many Masters.
Mhm.
That really, yes, I definitely do. I think we've lived before. I've done a past life regression before, and it was really quite remarkable. So,
What
I
did you
mean,
find, if you're willing to share? Who were
well, I
you?
am I am willing to share because it was kind of weird. I mean, not weird, but I I was actually sort of I passed through five different lives where one I was an Indian, one I was a teacher, one I was well, two of them or three of them I was leading expeditions. So in each one of those, I felt like I was leading a group of people, and I thought, wow, I never right. How would you ever know that?
Mhm.
So now when I think about like where I'm at now and what I do now, I'm just more comfortable in this space. Like I think I've done this before.
Yeah, that's very
Yeah.
important. Wow.
And maybe not in a spiritual way, but in other ways, whether it was education or geographically. I felt like we were on the continental divide and we were moving like to California. So, yeah, who knows?
Ah. What do you suspect is the true nature of reality then? This is
Ooh,
one of my lightning questions, but it works right now.
oh, I don't even know how. I don't even know how to answer that, right? I mean, I feel like my reality is here and now. But what about when we dream? What about that reality? I mean, is that really, two different worlds? Is it two different lives?
Mhm.
I don't
Some
know.
guests that I've spoken with, we talk about the possibility that, where time is a construct, that all your past lives are actually simultaneously going on now, and there's just something about being here, but nobody knows. I mean, come
Yeah.
on, Tammy, nobody knows. That's why it's like, what do you suspect if you have a guess? And you know what? It's perfectly fine to say, "You know what? I'm busy with this one here, so what else is going on? I don't need to know what I don't know," or, to some extent. It's
Right.
totally acceptable to say pass.
Okay, pass.
Okay. How do you feel people should, engage or stay connected to their soul or spirit? How should they take care of their spirit?
Yeah, I just always go back to meditation. But what I want to say about that is that there's different ways to meditate, right? For a long time for me, it was running. And
Mhm,
there was one point in my life where I went spirit. I was investigating for someone a situation of a lost person, and I felt like spirit was with me, but I was very jittery, and I'm like, let me go for a run, let me get through this. I went for a run, and it was quick, so 30 minutes, came back, and as I stopped running and I'm sweaty, I get chills, right? So I know spirits with me, but they gave me that time. So what I'm trying to say is whether it's exercising, whether it's running, walking, whatever, or for some people it's sitting, for some people it's a cup of coffee on the porch, right? listening to the birds in the morning, just that, right? Because then I feel like that puts us in more of a neutral, who am I? Where am I? Where do I go from this moment that you have the choice to say that's going to make me happy or feel like I'm having a good day?
Mhm. Yeah, you touch on something we haven't discussed before on this podcast, which is that, meditation is many things and your way of doing it, if you do it, may evolve over time. It shouldn't be I
Yeah.
mean, you shouldn't be if you're meditating at 25, it really shouldn't be the same thing that you're doing when you're 50. It should probably change
Yeah.
into something else.
Yeah.
But
And,
yeah.
and that change could be as much as the kind of music you listen to, you know? And
Mhm.
that's changed drastically for me over my journey. So, yeah, there's it's a whole nother world, I guess, to look into when you think about connecting and meditating.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. When you die, what do you hope to learn or discover or have revealed to you?
Yeah. You know what I this is what I want to know. I want to know if I really planned out my life before I came here. And I want to know that because it would answer so many questions about my childhood. Did I
Yeah.
plan this? That's my question.
Mhm. Good one. Where on this this is a profane question, as I say, compared to the other ones. Where can people find you and the good work that you're doing?
Ooh, well, thank you for that. You can find me on tammyyoungmedium.com is my webpage. On Facebook, I'm Tammy Young, Psychic Medium. And then on Instagram, I'm TY Medium.
Okay. Thank you. And do you have any final messages for the listening audience today?
Yeah, I would just tell people to be explorers, right? Be excited about what's out there, the things that are there that you don't see, but this in a good way. Check things out. Maybe go take a meditation class or maybe go see a psychic. Who knows? Just explore, be an explorer. Don't just I'm going to use the word corporate, but you know what I mean. Don't stay in
Mhm.
your box. Get out
Mhm.
and explore.
Mhm.
Thank
Tammy,
you
thank
for
you for
having me.
Oh, sure. Thank you for sharing your lovely energy. You have such a nice vibe, so I appreciate it very much. Thanks for watching. Click to join us on another journey, and don't forget to subscribe.